Hi, it's Joanne Dennison, and welcome to another edition of Sit in the Attendee's Chair. Glad to have you joining us today. To let you know, we are once again broadcasting from Westford Community Access TV, what's called Westford Cat, which is the town I live in Massachusetts, and they have these phenomenal studios, including a podcast studio that is absolutely beautiful. If you have Community Access TV in your community, you might want to look and see what they're doing. Some of them are doing pretty spectacular things. So I'm always appreciative that we get to come in and record here. And with me in the studio today is...
Ta-da! Steve the Great is here in the studio with his new hat.
New hat.
I just had to get that in. I like my new hat. It's my latest and greatest hat.
Many of you have probably seen him with a hat or seen him in pictures with a hat.
Cowboy hat.
It's a cowboy hat. He went to Texas for
Howdy,
work.
ma'am. Yep.
So came back with a cowboy hat.
I was looking at boots.
Yeah, now he sent me some pictures of some boots I wouldn't mind having. But anyway, moving right along. With us, not in the studio face-to-face, live, but virtually, is...
Hi, it's Kelly over Zoom.
Kelly over Zoom.
Kelly's in the big city of Boston, Massachusetts.
Yeah. And many of you know that Kelly's been working with us, almost a year now, because you graduated last May. Mm-hmm. Definitely right now, especially because she is our main support, our only support, it's cool to see what she's learning too and the feedback. And I think today she'll probably add some great questions to the topic. So today, sorry, no other guests. You get me. Me only, well, with the two of them, obviously. But in terms of content, it will all be coming from me. And I'm sure there's many others that have felt that way and a few that were. But I wanted to talk to you about a concept that I have grown in the mindset of since I've been in the industry. And I can't say I started this way. So when I first started planning events, I mean, probably even, high school, college, my first jobs out of college, which were actually in colleges, but I was doing student activities in the college center, so planning a lot of events. We always talked and we planned for this year's event. And, I'll do the air quote, this year's event or the next event. That's what you were planning, right? This year's event. Well, as time went on, and I can't say, I probably did some of it intuitively, but until I started really getting involved when I moved out of colleges and universities and started planning on my own and got involved in professional associations like MPI, and I started working on my CMP. That's when I really started hearing about how important meeting history was. So now we're looking at last year's meeting. And, I think we learned part of it by accident, part of it intuitively, but eventually people really start talking to you about, we got to look at the meeting history. What happened last year? How many people attended? What did we charge? What was room pickup? Who actually showed up to stuff? All these things. And we know that meeting history is, a lot of us at least have experienced how important the meeting history is looking back at last year's. So that 20% of your conference is never going to show up to breakfast. So you're not doing a guarantee of 100% of your attendees. I mean, that's just an example that comes off the top of my head. And Steve definitely wants to say something. No? We're good?
I can always say something.
Only if it pertains.
Oh, well, you better go on.
Okay. So does that make sense to you, Kelly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really important, I think, to look at events and you can see how to make it better the next year.
And that's the other part, along with gathering the data so you plan this year's better, like the breakfast example I gave. The other thing is looking back, from your post-mortem, post-con, wrap-up, whatever you called it after last year's event, to say, okay, maybe this didn't go bad, but this is how we can make it better, or, oh yeah, we definitely don't want this to happen again. It's using that experience, it's using that history to create a better meeting or event for this year, which makes sense. Go ahead.
You'll be sorry. I bet they got more people for breakfast when they had bacon.
Yeah, I think that's probably proven, unless it's, a vegetarian, vegan heavy group. But don't hit the table. Oh, sorry. Apparently I'm making noises. Okay. So, I think that's something that, again, part of it we slide into just by like, well, what happened last year? And, even if you were here last year, you need to go back, and because a year can change your memory, or 6 months whenever you start planning the next one. So go back, and it's so important that you document things to create that meeting history, because he's looking at me because I'm hitting the table again. Because what you just forget. And I mean, all of us, I think, have gone back to the file from last year and gone, shoot, I wish I had taken this down, or I wish I had notated this, or do you remember if, and what's even worse is if it's your first year on the event and the people who did it last year are now gone, and you're trying to figure out what the heck happened. So the creation of meeting history as the event is happening, or right after it wraps, or even leading up to it, because this is when you're documenting things like who registered 3 months out, 2 months out, 1 month out, the last week. Do you have a group that registers? I've talked to enough planners over the years. There are certain groups that everyone registers early and then it trickles down. And then there's other groups that there's a rush to register at the beginning, then it trickles for a while, and then everyone rushes at the end. And then there's the groups that all wait till the last minute to register, which is so hard, as we know, because hoteliers hate it because we can't give them numbers. And, if I talk to one more person about how they've had to create fake names to, fill spaces and housing blocks because they want to know 3 weeks out who's there. And it's like, wish I knew too. So we struggle with all of this, but part of it is knowing your group. But if you're the new kid on the block, you don't know that group. So it's really important that it's documented. But yeah, I think attendees to events, they have their own personality. I mean, it's not like you can say, oh, all people in this industry, or all people attending this type of meeting, or all people in this age group, or all the women, or whatever it is. You have to know your group. You have to know what they tend to do, because that's going to keep you sane. If you're one of these groups, say you came from an organization where everyone registered early, and you go to a group where everyone registers like in the last 10 days, and you're frantic, you're on the edge of your seat. Is that making sense to you too?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Everything you say makes sense to me.
Yeah, okay, we'll just keep going. So we're building on it. We're creating our meeting history as the meeting is unrolling. Again, both the actual before the event's having, during the event, and right after the event. So next year, there's really good information to both build on, negotiate contracts on, etc. So I'm sure most of you are aware of some degree of that, but it is something to always give a lot of thought to. So as time evolved in the early parts of my career, and I began to understand a lot more about goals and objectives, you can tell that's when I started really diving into CMP world and everything like that. And also understanding the impact of, understanding the importance of knowing the event. Like I was just talking about, like, what about this event? What makes this event different, unique, not necessarily from the marketing aspect, but from the building planning thing. Like, who are these group of people and what are they going to do that I need to plan around? But also understanding the organization that you're planning for. And the other thing that I can't say I'd really thought a lot about was the whole idea of financial sustainability. And this one has definitely grown as I've taught CMP over the past 20-something years. And, we all assume that, I came out of a world where you were supposed to make money if you had an event, because I came out of nonprofits and colleges and universities. So it took me a long time to understand that not all events literally had a positive bottom line, that they may be underwritten, that the bottom line may be increased somewhere else, like sales or whatever. So that was a whole big thing for me to get around. But no matter how you look at where the money comes in from or whose bottom line it ends up being in the organization, an event should still be financially sustainable. And you should not be having an event just because we've always had it. And many of you have heard me say that. That's something that drives me up the wall. Well, we always had it. Well, what's the purpose? Well, but financial sustainability, you should not be doing an event over and over and over again that does not, meet the financial goals. And again, where that money is, it could lose money in the meeting planning department, but it doesn't mean it's not making money somewhere else. But if overall, everywhere in the organization, it is losing money, that's a problem. So what I began to realize also, and if we're going to keep the growing process, is we needed to look at kind of a 3-year plan. It's more intuitive to look to the past, but what happens when we look to next year's meeting or an event? Like, how can thinking and beginning to plan next year's meeting and event help you plan this year's? So I began to think of this like constant 3-year continuum planning. You use last year's to have your history, to make better decisions for this year. But also, if you look to next year's, you can make better decisions for this year. Either of you, is that making any sense, since you've really never heard me go into this in this depth?
Makes sense to me.
It does make sense, yes.
It does. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when I think of what can I look to the future, like why would I look at next year's? This again is very, very important about knowing the organization's goals and objectives. What are they trying to do with this event every year, all years in the future? So again, it's that continuum. It's thinking more than this year's event. And when I think about it, just like we said, we're going to look at last year's in the history to build a better event this year. I think if we look to the future, we can build a better event this year. And what I mean by that is but we have to be really clear about what things we know we want to accomplish next year at the event. I mean, we may not have the detail that we have for this year, but we have to have some idea. So I'm thinking about an example, and I think I'm going to use something like a fundraiser, for a nonprofit, but it could also be a trade show. Anything will fit into it. So someone decides to start a fundraiser, and we'll do it like it was the beginning. So now you don't even have any history. You have the first year, it works well, but you want to get better year after year. And if any of you have ever had to start any kind of event, it's really hard to draw let's see, what am I trying to say? It's really hard to rein in everyone's ideas of what a first year is going to look like. And this, again, is where the goals and objectives, because everyone's like, we want, and if you've ever worked with nonprofits and fundraisers, you really know this. Oh, we're going to make so much money. We're going to make $10,000 the first year. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have 500 people at it. And I won't say that never happens, but it's a building process. When you unroll it's like starting a new company. If you unroll a meeting or an event, it is not going to hit the first year what you see it being in the future. Let's say 5 years from now, 10 years from now, your signature event. It is going to be the first one out. You're going to need to very clearly identify what you want this event to do kind of for a long time. But your attendance numbers are probably not going to be 500. They're going to be 150. Maybe you make $5,000. Maybe, so a lot of people don't have clear expectations of what will happen that first year. So you get through the first year, and of course your second year should be better if you really use the information. If you kept good notes, if you paid attention, what worked, what didn't. So that 150 people, year 2 may jump to 350. or maybe more, but 350, and now maybe you did make $10,000 the second year. But to put things in place that second year, that middle year, you also have to know where you're trying to go for next year. And let's say you want to make, maybe year 3 will be your $10,000 and your 500 people or whatever it is. You have to make sure you put things in place in that middle year to make that happen for year 3. So you're looking ahead to what you want to do in the future and backing up and saying, okay, if I want to achieve that next year, the year after, whatever, this becomes part of this meeting, whether it be eternal growth or press, or it could be so many different topics. You have to then take a step back to the year you're planning and say, what do I need to put into place this year to build that foundation even stronger so next year that happens? Is this making any sense, you two?
It is. Yes.
Certainly.
No, seriously.
Yes. It only makes sense.
What?
It only makes sense what you're saying.
It only makes sense?
It makes sense. It makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I think it definitely makes sense. It's just something I've never thought about. So, and I'm trying to think of, this is true. You have to know kind of what you want to happen the next year.
Goals and
while
objectives.
You're doing. Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
not something I've never thought about before, but it does make sense. And I agree with what you're saying.
Because you're hopefully going to build anyway. Whatever you do this year is better than last year, and assumably next year would automatically kind of be better. I mean, that's that's the thought process, at least. But to make an even bigger jump is thinking ahead to that year and then taking back what you need to put into place now.
Your best meeting is never your current meeting. Your best meeting's the next meeting. It gets better, right?
Well, that's the goal.
Yeah.
And better can mean a lot of different
Yeah.
things. I mean, that goes back to my favorite thing about best is a moving target, you know? I mean, because obviously, okay, if we look at the past 2 years, whoever planned their meeting in 2019 or the beginning of 2020, who was thinking their 2020 or 2021 meeting was going to be like, yeah, I just spent 5 years building this, and this is where we're going to reach in 2020 or 2021 or maybe even 2022. And then, that got changed. So you did your best for the situation it is. And now as we unwind, and maybe that's part of why this has been running through my mind, as we are coming out of this or learning how to manage it, as in the pandemic, it won't be a pandemic at some point. It will be a endemic or something. But anyway, it's something that we live with. This is our time to hit the reset button. I mean, this is what's going on worldwide, resetting. This is the Great Resignation. This is, everything is kind of getting a reset button hit. And so what was important to you, and I think this has happened to a lot of people and organizations, what was important to you in January of 2020 may not be the same priorities this year and moving forward. And
Right.
so what you might have even been thinking your 2023 one would look like may not be appropriate now, because we live in this hybrid world. I mean, we had hybrid before, no one just used it. But, like resetting what are those future meetings going to look like, and going back in this year of transition and going, okay, what do I need to put into place this year? So 2023, whatever it is, all face-to-face, all virtual, or some version of a hybrid. What do I need to do this year? Since this is kind of yet another crazy year because we're still in transition, what do I need to do to make sure 2023 is what we envision it being moving forward? Thoughts, you guys?
Yeah. Sorry. One thing I keep thinking about is just that it is kind of hard to picture what the next year will be, since it's been so unpredictable the past 2 years. Mm-hmm. So I was just thinking about that. I'm like, I know what you're saying. It's just kind of hard. Seems like it might be harder now than it was before.
I think you got to have a plan A and a plan B.
Right.
Well, and I think when we look at the goals and objectives, part of it is really looking at the big goals. You know, the goals more than the objectives, because the objectives is how you do it and how you measure it, attendance and whatever. But it's more important to think, what is the goal of this meeting moving forward? Like, what are we trying to do? Do we even need it? Do we need to replace it with some other type of meeting? I think that's where you start. Like, you're right, Kelly. It is just, so hard to know. But if we start with, what's the purpose of the meeting? What's the true goal? What do we want people to walk away with? Then go to, well, maybe we do or do not know what format will do it. And then going down to those other things.
Well, it's like I've heard you say in the past, your job is to deliver the best meeting, whatever the format.
Yes. Yes. But if you don't know the big picture goals of your organization, and I think it is the time that a lot of people are going to be sitting there and going, do we need this meeting and event? Do we throw it out? Do we totally redo it in another thing because we really can't go back to what we're doing, especially after 2 years of virtual? I mean, I was saying to Steve the other day, the headlines right now are so mixed. I'm seeing, I saw one the other day and it said, so face-to-face meetings and events, or face-to-face meetings are going on. Where's the attendees? And I know some meetings and events live, face-to-face, I shouldn't say live, learning the correct jargon is so interesting. The face-to-face meetings are going on, but this article was on how a lot of them, people aren't going back, not face-to-face. And will they ever, or will they always expect that? So it may be almost throwing out everything we've done in the past and just starting from scratch again. And again, as Kelly said, with this year being such a transitional year, it's really hard to know, which is why it's even more important to identify what is the end goal that we want to get out of every meeting and event we do. Okay, how do we build that in this world now based on what people do? Sorry. He's trying to get me to stop tapping on the table.
Can you not hear that? Anyway, this is a little bit off topic, but you have talked with me about it anyway before, about returning. Where are the attendees? And you were talking about dealing with their anxiety as well as the anxiety of meeting planners. So I don't know if that's part of this podcast or not. Returning back to a more full workload won't be the same after the last 2 years.
Yeah, in fact, I think it's posted for those of you who are in my CMP community, and that's open to anyone who prepared for their CMP with me, whether it was a 3-day face-to-face class, 2-day face-to-face class, one of the virtual classes, one of the all-day master classes, whatever it is. We posted an article the other day that really hit home for me. It actually ran in one of the MPI email publications. And it was an excellent article that, last year I did speak a lot about mental health and how we had to worry about it for so many reasons. The Great Resignation, would it increase violence at our events, et cetera. But this article they interviewed some really good experts about, we all think that even now, maybe more than last year, that, we're going to throw open the doors and everyone's going to go, yay, we can go to a live event. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. And a lot of people will be like that, but a lot of people aren't. And that's what they were talking about. And they actually took it from a couple of different angles. So if you're in the community, definitely go look for this article. They talked about it from the meeting planner standpoint, both as the individual and also from the attendee point. And what they were saying is even meeting planners, although, there's been a lot of discussion over the past 10 years about how meeting planners, a lot of them are very introverted and like to be behind the scenes. And now we're going to throw you in a room with thousands of people and, everything that's going on, is that we need that one. Anxiety right now is so common for people. And that it is showing up in so many different ways. People who never had anxiety problems are having anxiety problems. And the thought of going to a meeting or event with dozens or hundreds or thousands of people is an extremely overwhelming, and it's not even necessarily so much the virus, it's just you haven't been in thousands of people in a couple of years, most of us.
Especially if you were working from home. And, with more people working from home, there might be more childcare problems that might limit their attendance as well because they were used to being home with them.
Right, which is why so many of them are pushing back, going back into the office too, and offices. But they talked about the anxiety for meeting planners, but they also said, we cannot, and part of this working from home thing is from working from home, people have not been rushing around the way they did when they commuted to an office every day or they were flying to meetings and events. Think about your travel days. Just think about your travel days. I mean, I said, I forget which one of you I was talking to the other day, but I said, I can remember, one 10-day period within a year before the pandemic where I was in 4 cities and presenting, I think, in all 4 places. And I won't say that was the norm for me. It is for some of my other friends who present. But, I didn't think about not doing it. I mean, it had to be very carefully orchestrated. But we're out of habit of that. And it is extremely stressful to go talk to people who are commuting back to work. And they're like, even if they're doing it one day, and it's like trying to rethink out everything and how this all works and allowing for the extra 10 minutes here. And they're finding it, a lot of them are finding it extremely stressful. So if you have to like get on a plane and travel down and, it's going to take a toll on your body that you're not expecting because you always did that. You didn't think of cramming a million. Oh, I can fly in the morning and I'll have my, pre-con in the afternoon and then I'll go do the room setup that night. And you might be shocked and you can't bury yourself into a hole, going into your meeting. And they even said things like for attendees, where we used to put a 15-minute break, we really need to think about putting a half-hour break because people are not used to the same intensity. They're going to need more time to, think and breathe and check email and we're just not operating at the same speed we were before, and I'm not sure that that's a bad thing. But we have to think about it for ourselves, for our team, being on site, traveling to on site, but also for our attendees. So, thoughts on that?
I had another thought unrelated to that.
Can we hold that one for a minute while we just...
Certainly.
Well, you traveled a couple of weeks ago for the first time since we came home.
I did.
And you didn't find it stressful?
I think it was more just being out of practice.
Yeah.
Not...
But that has its own stress.
Yes. Oh, yeah, it does.
Passport holder. Oh, wait, and things have changed even at TSA since the pandemic started.
Right. So, yeah, it was a little stressful. Plus, you weren't there to guide me and keep me from getting lost.
Yeah, Steve's direction and sign reading isn't always...
geographically challenged.
Yeah. How about you, Kelly? I mean, you've flown, a number of times in the past couple years. Do you find it more intense?
Yes, I think a little bit, but it's so weird because when I think back to what it is, I think we talked about this at one point, but when I think back to what it is that's making me feel like a little bit more anxious about something, it's kind of hard to put your finger on it, what it is that's causing this anxiety. But it's it's weird because I don't think I've been to too many in-person events in a while. But I feel like if I were to go to one, I definitely would be a little overwhelmed just because it's something we're not used to after 2 or how many years it's been of basically not doing anything like that.
Yeah.
So it's weird.
And you bring up a good point. From the things please don't close that. No. He's trying to close Zoom in the middle of our call here. One of the things that is coming up is it's the second year of the pandemic that got to a lot of people, and it's just we haven't lived like this for 2 years. I mean, some people have, some people kept traveling, vacationing, going places, and I'm not saying that judgmentally, not my job to. It's just the majority of people have not been living their life the way they did before March 14th or whatever it was, 2020. You know, family, friends, restaurants, you know, just having, you know, a concert of 20,000 people, a conference of 5,000. This isn't what people are doing. And like, there's this low level or high level, there's anxiety in the air. And that's what they're talking about, is that this was such an unknown. And of course, it kept evolving and changing and everything. So we were always on edge, waiting to see what happened next. So I think you're right, Kelly. We can't always put our finger on it. But I will say to any of you out there who are finding yourself at times, maybe shockingly to you, uncomfortable, you are not alone. And I will definitely put myself into that too. Some things have really caught me off guard because I don't think of myself as an anxious person. And, you know, you're going to have a lot of attendees who, even if they go, maybe because they have to, they're not going to be comfortable. So, you know, if we go back to sit in the attendee's chair and Maslow, your job is to make people comfortable. And it may not be, do you have seating 6 feet apart and, you know, everyone wearing masks? It may be just the intensity of what's going on and being out there. Does that make sense, you guys?
Mm-hmm. I just wonder if they'd be, it's just a thought, less inclined to do after-meeting activities or off-sites or things like that as well because of that anxiety. I don't know.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, they go to what they have to do and then go back. And if it means like getting on buses or boats or anything, like maybe a social event on the same property but off premise, you know.
I don't know, just a
off
thought.
site. That's interesting. But, you know, I think what we're saying is we've got to love and care for the people who are attending our meetings and take all this into consideration. You can't go from 0 to 1,000 in your first meeting, or, you know, people are going to be resigning even faster than they already are. And, you know, this could cause people to be fly off the handle easier. You know, again, a lot of times people get upset at meetings just because something else is going on, and this is sure as heck something else. They're nervous, they're anxious, they're whatever. So, you know, this is all stuff to think about, you know, as you're planning this year's meeting and next year's meeting. And again, if you're looking to the future ones, you know, you're really looking at the big goals. Like, what is it we're trying to accomplish in our meetings and events? Not even these specific meetings and events, but what are our meetings and events supposed to accomplish? And do we need to go back and throw out what we've done? Not everything, but, you know, maybe, well, we always have this meeting in January and this meeting in May, and then we do a such and such in August. And, you know, maybe it's time to relook at all that, because it is a different world and every single person in it is different at this. Well, they were different before, but they have changed in the 2 years, even if they won't admit it. We have all changed in some way, shape, or form in the past 2 years. Make sense? What were you going to say before on a different topic?
Oh, I don't know. I forgot that one already, but I have another one.
Okay, just please try to make it somewhat pertain.
Oh, this definitely pertains. Going back to your original point about historical viewpoints of your meetings, would that be a good place to include, if you have it, any ROI information as well? So that you return on investment to the corporation. You know, did they sell more product because of this sales meeting? You know,
well, I would hope that would be in meeting history, but yeah, right. Yeah. A lot of people do not track it because they go, oh, well, that's another department and they don't share information with us. Maybe we should do a whole podcast on that sometime. How to collect ROI when nobody wants to include you in the conversation, but they expect you to create it. Yeah, that would be. Kelly, make a note, because if I stop now and write a note, we'll, you know, be lost forever. That's a really good point. But that, you know, and going forward too, what ROI do you expect out of your future meetings in this brave new world? And it's I think it's a very big time that people need to scrap most of what they've done and relook at it.
I agree.
He's nodding his head. Can't you hear that? What are your thoughts, Kelly? Anything else you want to?
Not really. Sorry, I was taking the note.
Oh, that's right. I asked you to write something down, then I asked you a question.
I just got the end of that, so I'm not exactly sure.
No, don't worry about it. It's like the server who comes up to you right after you put food in your mouth and says, "So how is everything?" Right? It's like, no, I can't do this two things at the same time. You know, I guess if I was to sum it up in one point, I can't believe I wrote this at the bottom of my piece of paper. Is it should, when you're planning, it should never just be about this year. And we don't know that when we start out. We don't know why we would look other than this year. The only exception is if it's going to be a one-time event, you know, and some events are a one-time event, you know, 50th anniversary, although I've seen companies then develop it into some kind of annual something. But, you know, if it's a one-time event, yeah, you know, not as much a worry. But any other event, thinking in I don't even know if 3-year continuum is the right expression. 3-year pattern, 3-year continuum is always what sticks in my head, though.
Extension?
I don't know. No. And then I think of that word in Alice in Wonderland, you know, the whole calendar. Never mind. I wouldn't even go there. But you should, you know, we, not you, we should never be thinking just about this year's event. It is the point. So hopefully this got you thinking about, you know, this concept and how you can utilize it. That was my goal. I talk about this a little bit when I teach the CMP class under you know, the financial sustainability of an event. But I'd always wanted to kind of go a little bit deeper because people sometimes call me up and go, I want to see how I go with this. And it was always well, how do we look at next year's event to help plan this year's event? So I'm hoping it helps some. For those of you in the community, you can, we have been posting questions for future ones, like I plan to do one on creative and intellectual property, music licensing, that kind of thing in the future. So we've Kelly posted asking what questions would you like to see answered during that podcast. And also one on working with speakers, same thing. What would you like to know about working with speakers that you don't know? And we're going to be doing that, you know, pretty often. We plan to do this in the future. What would you like to make sure it includes? And we've got some other cool things coming up on that too. So I hope those of you who are eligible really do join the community. There's about 1,000 of you who are eligible, if not more, but I can't find everyone anymore. So other thoughts?
Commercial break. Okay. Hey, if you want to get on the distribution list for the e-guide, text the word MeetGuide, M-E-E-T, MeetGuide, all one word, to this magic number, 22828. MeetGuide, 22828.
Well, wasn't that something? And yeah, I really suggest if you want information from me, it's been interesting. The past couple of weeks, I've had a lot of people texting and also emailing me with questions specifically about the upcoming CMP class, when's it going to be scheduled and everything like that. And we've been putting information out every issue of the e-guide with, you know, updated what's going on and everything like that. I always love being in contact with people, and I try to individualize my replies as much as I can. But, you know, if you can find the information and everything that we're sending out, I'd appreciate you starting there so I can then have the time to help you with something that's, you know, a little more in depth and that the, you know, is specific to you. Excuse me, starting to cough. So just, you know, if you're interested in, yeah, great. It looks like I left the bottle of water in the car. Oh, well. You know, if you're interested in knowing stuff that's going on, we always announce when podcasts come out. We do a lot of things in the e-guide and, of course, on Instagram and Twitter and the MeetGuide page on LinkedIn. I haven't been so active lately on my personal page on LinkedIn, but if you're on the MeetGuide, you'll be able to see what's going on too. So always a good thing if you want to know what I'm thinking or opportunities I'm creating for you. I know we all get newsletters and we go, oh, I don't have time to read these. But, try to take a look as you can before you reach out to me for some general information. Don't mean to sound rude, just I want to be able to spend my time answering the things that can't be answered in a newsletter. So, Kelly, anything else?
No, I think that's it.
Well, and back to the community, because Kelly's a huge part of that. She's maintaining it right now. Is again, if you did part of your preparation with me for your CMP, again, classes through my company or classes that were held at other places like conferences or particular chapters or whatever, you're eligible to be in that community. It's free. We moved to a new platform, Mighty Network, to create something that was much more usable and manageable and usable for you all. And if you didn't get an invitation or you don't know, you can email Kelly at
JoanneDennison.com.
Yep. Or you can go to mightynetwork.com and put, what do they put in it? Joanne Dennison CMP community?
Yes. And you should be able to request to join.
Yeah.
And then we'll get back to you pretty quickly.
Yeah. She's got lists of some of who we know who was in my class like the first 8 years, and then who was in my class like the past 6 years, and we're missing a lot of the center. And if you took it at like WEC or IMAX or again some of the other chapters or something, sometimes I was never given a list of who was in the class, but we can certainly talk about it. So we're pretty excited about that, and we're going to be working towards some live events, if not by the end of this year, then 2023. That's the goal, at least, right? So anything else, guys?
I have an email address too, stevethegreat@joannedennison.com. I never get any mail, though, so, if you want to cheer me up, send me a piece. I can't help you with anything.
You can answer tax questions.
Oh, yeah, I could do that.
Especially if you're a nonprofit.
Yes. And the other thing that's still on my mind, and we'll talk about this after the podcast probably, is what calendar thing in Alice?
Yeah, well,
okay.
We need to watch Alice in Wonderland again. It's called the Calendrium, I forget what it is. Those of you who have watched the Johnny Depp Alice in Wonderland know what I'm talking about. So, okay, anything we want to jump in, add, last thoughts about material or things they should know or things they should do, or?
Just one thing that's coming to my mind is wherever you're listening to the podcast now, we also have many other options of places to listen to. I think we're on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Podbean, and there's also a Podbean app. I feel like I might be missing one.
YouTube,
obviously.
Yeah.
Google?
But
Google?
Oh, and Google Podcasts. Yes, and I believe that's it.
Is Google the one where you can ask Alexa?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, you can just say, Alexa, play Joanne's podcast or something.
Or sit in the attendee's chair.
Sit in the attendee's chair. Play Sit in the attendee's chair, and it'll bring up one, and you can say, play the next one, and play the next one, and you can spend the night, rather than watching Hallmark movies, you can listen to Joanne.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure there is a win on either of those, but it's totally up to you. But anyway,
they do have a lot of Hallmark movies with meeting planners, though. And Joanne sits there and criticizes. She would never wear heels to that, or they would never have that at an event.
At least they've stopped calling them party planners in most of the movies. So anyway, okay. So before we wander off into too much crazy stuff here, thank you so much for listening. I hope you found something to think about. When I was teaching, actually it started in Kelly's class at Boston University, I started drilling down what I like people to do, what I hope I do myself when I'm on the learning side is I summed it up in learn, think, and apply. So it's the idea of, gather the material from somewhere where you're reading a podcast, a class, or whatever. That's the learning part. Then think about it. Like really don't just memorize it, don't absorb it, and suck it down into 50 pages of notes that you'll never reread. But, really think about it and how it could apply to what you're doing. And then the third step being apply, because when you actually do it, that's when you've actually really learned it too. So hopefully this particular podcast let you learn something new, gives you plenty to think about. I've been accused of messing with people's minds, so that'll work for me, and then apply it to what you're doing. So anyway, thanks again so much. And you two want to sign off?
Night all.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. We'll talk with you next time. Bye-bye.